October edition of Pints with Pete. With the leaves changing, the weather changing, we want to talk about Unico in heating, and that's going to be the topic of today's discussion. So we're gonna go through the various ways that we can provide heating with Unico. We're going to tell you the techniques of them. Big thing we're going to talk about today is our new I-Series. Now, the new I-Series came out this May. It's an inverter heat pump, and by its very nature, it's a heating product as well as a cooling product, and can heat down to some very, very low temperatures. So we're going to talk about the different forms of heating that are available with Unico. And I'm going to just go kick this off. Now, this will be recorded. We will put this online to our unicosystem.com site. And it's also, and if you haven't taken this, I encourage you to, it's called Unico University. And that is available on our tech.unicosystem.com site. So there's a number of classes. There's about 15 online classes and an equal number of video presentations that are available on here. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. Again, everybody mute your phone. If you haven't already, mute your phone. And if you have a question, just type it in on the chat bar. So remember, the person who asked me the best question will be eligible to win our monthly giveaway of a a six-pack of a Missouri microbrew. And this being Halloween, I believe it will be a pumpkin flavored. So I hope you like pumpkin. So I'm going to kick this off right now. First of all, welcome everybody for coming. Unico, and this is what I'm trying to do with these Unico universities, we're involved with all aspects of HVAC, not just air conditioning. Now, we're known for our outstanding comfort in air conditioning, but we also will provide superior heating. So you can see in this slide here, this is the Unico offices in St. Louis. We have Unico here as our year-round heating and cooling system. Now, what we happen to do here is we use a Unico system with a heat pump, and then for the cold weather, we use a boiler. And in these cases, these are small copper fin tube boilers. So we can provide a year-round comfort with the Unico system. Now, why did we use Unico for heating? A lot of these are the same reasons why we use Unico for cooling. There's no drafts. There's no streaking of dirt. They're very even temperatures. Unlike a conventional furnace, you don't get a big blast of hot air and then it cools down. Our ducts are extremely efficient. The way our systems work, you'll have virtually no duct leakage. The big issue with our systems is always comfort. You don't see it, you don't hear it, you don't feel it. And of course, the other thing with Unico is our space issue. We take up about 1/3 the space of a conventional ducted sheet metal system. So as I say, there are many reasons why to use the Unico system. And this is the concept. This is from a book that came out a few years ago about the complete comfort story. And as you can see here, you have a boiler, you have radiant floor, you have an indirect water heater, and the Unico system. That's all ties in very well with one another. So really, hydronics and Unico go hand in glove with one another. We can use the Unico system with the heat pump. Some places heat pumps have a bad reputation. In those areas, we call it a 9-month system, because essentially the Unico system will be providing heating or cooling for all but the coldest days. So as I say, we can use Unico as our exclusive heating source, or many people with the heat pump use it merely for supplemental heat. They'll run the heat pump down to, say, 30 degrees, and then below that, their boiler will come on. And that's exactly what I do in my house here in St. Louis, is I run the heat pump down to 30, and then below that, my boiler kicks on. So we have 5 methods now we can provide heat. We can use a heat pump, by which I mean air-to-air heat pump. We can use a geothermal heat pump, which is an air-to-air or air-to-water heat pump. We can use a hot water coil, electric furnace. And in red, this is the big thing. The new I-Series by Unico is a great inverter heat pump for even the coldest climates. So when I say coldest climates, they are producing more energy than they're using at even 25 degrees below zero. So very, very efficient heating with that I-Series. So we're going to talk a little bit in depth about that. There's our heat pump coil. Now this is our TXV coil. And as you notice, it's a very thick coil. It's a 6-row deep refrigeration coil. So we can actually use 2 of these coils as accumulators. One of the aspects of heat pumps is it's a slightly different charge in the winter than it is in the summer. And so what we do with this deeper coil is we use that as an accumulator. So again, those are, today it's the same coil for cooling only, our heat pump. What is different is it's a different expansion valve. And there is a 24-volt relay for anti-frost bypass. Another item that is a lot of times we sell with heat pumps is they'll sell a mild weather control. In other words, what we do is for mild days, say 65-degree air temperature, what we will do is through this control, which is our part number UPC 65, we will shut off the fan on the outside unit, on the heat pump outside unit, in order to keep the head pressure up. Again, our heat pumps put out warmer temperatures than a conventional heat pump. All heat pumps do have a thing called a balance point, and basically what a balance point means is that as the temperatures get colder, the system produces less heat. So at some point, and that's going to be determined not only by your equipment, but what kind of house you have. If you have an old drafty house, you're going to have a much higher balance point than with a new construction house. And below that balance point, you need to fill that up with auxiliary or emergency heat. So typically, we set up a heat pump. In my case, I set up a heat pump for about 32, and in my case, 30-degree outside temperature. Below that, the heat pump shuts off, and the boiler comes on. So I get the best of all worlds in terms of energy efficiency. This is a very common concept especially in some of our rural markets in the United States, is geothermal. What they're doing is they're drilling a well. You have the same temperature year-round when you get below a certain level. For instance, anyone who's been in a cave knows that they stay at a pretty even 50 degrees year-round. So a geothermal system works as both heating and cooling. And this is not an item we make, but there are many companies out there who do make geothermal equipment. To the Unico system, here you see one with a vertical well. As far as the Unico system is concerned, we are merely using it, as you can see in this example right here. Here's the geothermal system. Off to your left is the Unico system. There's 2 ways we can set this up with geothermal. We can set it up for air to refrigerant, in which case we use our refrigerant coil, or we can set it up air to water, in which case we use our water coil. This is our water coil. Now, one thing about our water coils, our chilled water coil, you can run hot water through a chilled water coil. The reason you can't do the other way around is there is a drain pan which is in this chilled water coil. The 5-ton system is a little bit bigger. That's a coil instead of a slab coil, but it's essentially the same idea. When we look at heating with a chilled water coil, now with geothermal, 110-degree water temperature is probably about the most you're going to be able to get out of it. If you have 110-degree water with our 2 to 2.5-ton system, with 600 CFM of air and 4 gallons per minute, we will put out 23,000 BTUs. Now, if we can raise that to 140 degrees, such as working with a boiler, now our output almost doubles. We go to now the same setup, the same exact setup will give us 41,000 BTUs. So as I say, the warmer the entering water temperature, the more BTUs we get out of the system. However, to protect the motor that we have, whether it's a PSC motor or an EC motor, it is in the airstream. So we try not to use hotter entering water than 150 degrees. This is the new I-Series. This is what we've been talking about with Unico. This is a inverter technology. It's the first and only mini-split product that can combine the best of both ducted and ductless together, so we can have a combination of Unico and the inverter technology. And a couple of things that this does that really lends it to heating is, first of all, it has an intelligent defrost. And what the intelligent defrost does is, instead of doing the standard defrost where you shut down from heating and go into cooling to defrost the outside coil, instead what Unico does is we have a hot gas bypass. There's a hot gas bypass coming directly off of the compressor, which then melts the outside ice. Now, what makes this different is you can have heating with this, with the heat pump, even when it is in defrost mode. Another thing with this, it's not published, you have to find it in the schematics. We have two heaters that are pre-wired. We have one that is a drain pan heater, so that your condensate drain pan will keep draining. The other one is there is a crankcase heater. The crankcase heater is so that we can operate these systems on as low a temperature as we have. With the I-Series, currently we have three sizes. We make a 2-ton, a 2.5-ton, and a 3-ton system. There's a wide selection of indoor to outdoor units. There are 5 indoor units ranging from 1 through 3 tons. They can be a high wall mount unit. We have that in 1-ton and 2-ton sizes. Or it can be a Unico system. That's offered from 1 through 3 sizes. Here you can see our operation limit. We're very comfortable in running these down to 5 degrees above zero. Even at 25 below zero, this system is still producing more energy than it's using. What happens, though, and these are the numbers for our 3-ton system, at 47 degrees, you get 35,700 BTUs. 17 degrees, which is the other number that we're required to test at, we get 26,500 BTUs. 5 degrees, and again, for most parts of the United States, 5 degrees is what our design temperature is. It's putting out almost 20,000 BTUs. Now, if it is 25 degrees below zero, the system is still producing heat, but it's producing about 9,200 BTUs. So what we have with this is we have a need to provide either hot water, which we see right here as auxiliary or emergency heat, or an electric furnace. Your choice is up to you and what your climatic conditions are, what the cost of fuel in your area is, etc. But the heating module is essentially the same as an automobile. When your car turns on heating, you have hot water going through a coil that air passes through a fan with, and then that delivers hot air to the different parts of the room. With the I-Series, we can control this with either outputs labeled S1, S2, S3, or you can just get a 2-stage thermostat. Either way will turn on the emergency heat below a predetermined temperature. This is how we connect it, very simple. We can use this with hot water or an electric furnace. Again, our hot water coils, we had mentioned this before with the geothermal. We make these to work with the entering water temperature, the CFM, and the gallons per minute. So again, if you take a look here, 120 degrees water with our 3-ton system with 6 gallons per minute puts out 27,000 BTUs. If we can crank that up to 160, we almost double. We get to 50,000 BTUs output. Now again, that's output. That's not as we typically rate furnaces at 70% efficiency. Again, if we look at that example, 120 degree water, we get 28,000 BTUs, but Remember, to protect the motor, which is in the airstream, we don't recommend above 150-degree entering water temperature. This is the wiring schematic. They're very simple to hook these up. This is our EC motor. It's the same wiring that you would with any other thermostat block. The accessory terminals here, if you're using a boiler, you see these two terminals here labeled hot water. That is a 250-volt dry contact. You just hook that up to the boiler, the valve, or the pump, and that will energize the hot water. If you're using electric furnaces, we'll talk about later, you can energize those, so when you go to S3, or stage 3, it will shut off the outside unit and bring on the third stage of emergency heat. So again, very simple to do this. We have all these wiring diagrams in the installation manual. Now here you can see we can have up to 3 stages of heat with our hot water, with our electric heater. This is true with the larger heaters that are out there. They have increments of 5 kW that would come on as the outside unit or the outside temperatures change. Then you would energize step 1, step 2, and then finally step 3. So again, these are very simple to do. They're again the same wiring diagram you see elsewhere. This is on our board. This is the control board. If you're using hot water, you notice you have a boiler priority switch. You can set up your hot water coil to be your emergency heat, or in my case, it's set to primary heat. If you use our PSC motor, by the way, our PSC motors are fine with hot water heating. It's just that you will need to get an add-on relay like a Coil SR501. The electric duct heater, these mount directly to the blower. This is what they look like. They include the breakers. And this is very simple, a very simple installation. This is our 10 kW. We make these from 2.5 up to 20 kW. We only use the 20 kW on the larger systems, the 3642 and the 4860s. So this is the wiring diagram, how we would energize the heat pump. Heat pumps can be energized in one of 2 methods. The vast majority of heat pump manufacturers energize the heat pump on O, which means it comes on when it's calling for heating. One brand in particular, Rheem and Rude, energize on the B valve. So we allow you either way to do this. It's just merely where you set the switch, and if you do have a B valve, you do have a wire that you have to cut. Some of our, and you need to check with your manufacturer, some brands, particular Carrier and Bryant, their heat pump units require a factory isolation relay, because sometimes they can get false signals on defrost. But again, this is covered in our Bulletin 30-39, which is our installation manual. Again, Unico is the premier choice for both heating and cooling, and as I say, you can either use it as supplemental heating. One of these applications is radiant floor heating. We do a lot of custom homes that have radiant floor heating, and I'll be the first one to tell you, radiant floor, probably the best source of heat out there. The only thing is it takes a long time to respond. So what a lot of people do with radiant floor is they have a boiler anyway. They'll put in a slide-in hot water coil, and then for the shoulder season or the in-between season, they'll have the boiler run sending hot water to our coil. So they get the heat immediately. The other way is we can use it, again, up to 150,000 BTUs of heating with the hot water coil. And, of course, the I-Series is something you're going to be hearing more and more about. We're going to feature this at the ASHRAE show in Chicago. This has been out for about 5 or 6 months. It is a 1-ton, 2-ton, and 3-ton system that is a heat pump that uses the inverter technology. In other words, inverter technology just supplies the right amount of heating or cooling based upon what the load is. So unlike a heat pump that we normally sell that's either on or off, This is fluctuating. It's fluctuating based upon the load. So that's our performance here on heating. As I say, we have a lot of applications where heating can be used. I had a couple of questions. Does anybody have any questions out there? Is there anything? I'm going to turn it over to you guys. This is your part right here. Remember, the best question we get gets a 6-pack of a Missouri microbrew, probably a pumpkin brew this time of year. So I'd like to be able to get that out. Is there anybody who has any questions? Yes, very good. It can be used with, in some cases they do use, instead of a boiler, they use a water heater. They do use a water heater for both domestic hot water and for space heating. You have to check your local codes. Again, with a water heater, you're not going to be able to get quite as high a temperature as you would with a boiler, but that's a very common form of heating. They call it hydro heat. So that's a good question there. Do we have any other questions from anyone out there? Well, it's Halloween. I hope I didn't lose any of my customers to trick or treat. We'll be doing this again the end of next month. Our topic then will be on spot cooling. Again, please tell your friends about Pints with Pete. This is a monthly feature. We do this the last Friday of the month at 3 o'clock Central, 4 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific. Or excuse me, 1 o'clock Pacific, 2 o'clock Mountain Time. So everybody, have a safe and happy weekend, and hope to see you at the next Pints with Pete.